That makes you third in Europe behind Russia and Germany. And while your population has grown very rapidly, most European countries recently have begun losing population. You also have several million Turks living in Western Europe, and you have a younger population than the rest of Europe. And so, if you look at football potential, which depends on the numbers of young men, your country is close even to Germany. Maybe you have more football potential in Germany based on raw numbers. Your advantage number two is that there are many German Turks. There's no other national team in Europe which has as many players who grew up in another European country as yours does. In 1961, you signed a treaty with West Germany to send thousands of Turkish Gastarbeiter as fodder for the German economic miracle. And the idea was that these Gastarbeiter would return to Turkey, of course most didn't, and today 2 million Turkish citizens live in Germany. Now, I come to my interview with Tayfun Korkut, who used to, of course, play for Fenerbahçe for many years, about Turkish Germans and Turkish football. And I want to talk about this interview because I spoke to Tayfun for a very long time. In fact, I had the feeling he would happily have talked all night. And it was one of the most interesting interviews I have ever had with a footballer. Of course, talking to a footballer is often more difficult than talking to a plant, as Prince Charles of Britain does. So it doesn't say much, but Tayfun was a very interesting guy. We spoke German, and he spoke it with the accent of the Swabian region in Germany where he grew up. And it was very strange to me because here's this guy who looks like a Turk, he's playing football for Turkey, but he sounds like he's from Stuttgart, and of course he is. We were talking in the bar of the hotel where Turkey were preparing to fly to England to play a match in Sunderland where English fans misbehaved again. And we talked until nearly midnight in the hotel bar, and there were constant streams of people coming up to Tayfun to say hello, to ask when he would come back to play for Fenerbahçe, etc. And Tayfun told me, he said, many Turks in Germany have a special bond with their land because they miss it. My mother cleaned and my pa was a mechanic, a very normal worker's family. These people always wanted to go back, but my father never made it. My parents will never go home to Turkey now. So it makes them proud to see me play for my country. I asked him if German Turks were different from Turkish Turks in the football team, and to my surprise he answered frankly. He said, it is a problem. Sometimes at table, 3 or 4 of us German Turks speak German because it's our first language. There are some things that would make you say, that's them from Germany. At first our Turkish wasn't so good, and sometimes you understand each other better because you grew up in the same way. Until a few years ago, I knew more about German culture than Turkish culture. Only when I played 5 years for Fenerbahçe did I get to know my own country. But now this problem does not exist. Most players have played in Turkey, including the ones from Germany. Of course, we learned a lot here in Turkey. Now, the strange thing is that these excellent Turkish-German footballers tend to fail in the Bundesliga in Germany. Okay, Yildiray Baştürk has done well, and so have the Altintop twins, but even the great young talent Nuri Sahin ended up on the bench at Borussia Dortmund before he went to play in Germany, in Holland. So I asked Tayfun, why did these guys fail in the Bundesliga? And Tayfun said, German clubs, coaches saw Turks as geniuses on the ball, but as having no discipline. It wasn't racism, it was just a prejudice against Turkish footballers. And maybe it was justified, as there were many young Turkish players who couldn't make the jump to the senior teams, sometimes because of problems in their private lives. The second generation of Turks in Germany, my generation, had problems because many youths didn't adjust to the culture in Germany. I also asked Professor Dennis Gökçe about this because he lived in Munich as a child in the 1950s. And Professor Gökçe told me, it's difficult for the second generation of Turks in Germany. Many of them are unemployed, they hang around train stations. Now, what I understand personally is that the first generation of Turkish immigrants comes to Western Europe expecting to be discriminated, expecting low pay and difficult lives. But the second generation born in Western Europe thinks, well, we belong to this country, to Germany, we demand to be accepted. And then when they grow up and they discover that they're treated as foreigners, as Turks, they get angry. There's an interesting study by a sociologist at the University of Hanover who shows that a very large proportion of fights in local amateur football matches in Germany happens when you have a Turkish team in Germany playing a German team. And what happens is the Turkish team often thinks the referee is a German, he's against us, and the referee is ignoring the racist abuse that the German team is giving us. And I know this from personal experience, because before my left knee collapse, I used to play in Paris, where I live, for a team called Ireland in this sort of diplomats league in Paris. And we used to play against teams like Italy, Cameroon, Morocco, and everyone played in their national kit. So it was a bit like playing in the World Cup. You know, when we played against Italy, they were in blue. We, Ireland, were in green. So it felt like being in the World Cup. And the team everyone hated to play against was Turkey, because we all felt that their players were difficult, they were angry, they fought. And eventually, the Turkish team left our league after a conflict, which is absolutely typical of what happens in Western European amateur football with Turkish teams. Not all, but some. So it's hard being a Turkish immigrant in Western Europe sometimes, and you see that in the biographies of Turkish footballers. But still, there's no doubt German footballers, German Turkish players have enriched your national team. Even though they supposedly sometimes quarrel with Turkish religious players and even with Turkish secular players, and supposedly the German Turks and the Turkish Turks don't always talk, they still get along well enough to play better football together than Turkey has ever played together before. You know, we can see on the field that they get on well enough. And what's also happened, as Tayfun says, is that the Turkish Turks in the national team have become a bit European over the years, because many of your Turkish players have played with and against Europeans in club football, whether it's here at Fenerbahçe or in England at Newcastle. And you have players like Emre and Nihat Kaveci who have played for Western clubs. So your Turkish players stop being 100% Turkish and they become a mix of Turkish and European footballers. So why has Turkish football become European? It's because many of the key people in it are Europeans. And they've learned Spanish or German ways of behaving on the field and off the field. So they're not 100% Turkish. And when I asked Tayfun where he would live after he retired from football, he said, I don't know. I don't know where my homeland is. Turkey, Germany, and now I feel very well in Spain, where he was playing then. I haven't even bought a house anywhere. Now, if you take Tayfun, for example, he's partly a Turk, he's partly a German, and he's partly a citizen of the world. Now, if you want to benefit from European impulses, from European influences in football, outside football, you will have to accept that you are going to become partly European. You're going to become more like Tayfun. Now, successful nations, I believe, accept their citizens of the world. London, where I spent many years, is now not an English city, it's a world city. New York, of course, the same thing, and these are the richest, most vibrant cities in the world. So, if Turkey is to progress in football, you need people who are citizens of the world because they know what the best way of doing things is in other countries. So Turkish Germans know from Germany what's the best way to play football. And they spread that knowledge to Turkey. So you need Turks like that. I'm coming to the end, you'll be pleased to hear, and I said at the beginning that I would ask what Turkish football tells us about Turkey's relationship with Europe. Well, the lesson from Turkish football to me seems obvious. Your football improved drastically once you got European impulses through German coaches, through Turkish-German players, and through Turkish clubs playing in European competitions. So in the last 30 years, your football has become European. And now let's look at politics, and there are obvious parallels. In the last 20 or 30 years, several countries on the margins of Europe have joined the European Union: Spain, Portugal, Greece, with histories of undemocratic rule that are similar to Turkey's. In fact, these were countries that were seen as not European in the same way that Turkey is seen as not European today. And Spain, Portugal, and Greece became European democracies by joining the European Union. So in other words, it's possible to become European in politics and in football.